Hey, fellow freaksters, it's Tim from the Moratorium. Just here to remind you that if you enjoy what you hear, please like, share, and subscribe, then rinse and repeat. We're just a couple of small-town nerds trying to make sweet geek love to your ear holes, and we could use your support. Check out our website for movie reviews, links to social media, merch, movies, and more. You can find us at themoratorium.com. Now that that's out of the way, on with the shenanigans. Halloween might be over, but we're all about sharing the love for all things creepy and scary. This week in the Moratorium, we continue our special interview series with a California native whose film career spans further than we imagined. But you don't need me to spoil anything here. Let's get on with the show. All right. Welcome to another special edition of the Moratorium. This is our interview series. And today I am talking with a leader in the movement of rogue filmmaking and distribution, Tony Masiello. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yep, you sure did.
All right. I should have asked you before. I just started blurting it out. But
Oh, that's quite all right.
So Tony, you run and operate owner of SOV Horror. Tell me and our audience about SOV Horror.
Yeah, so SOVhorror.com is our website, and pretty much we're a distribution company. We distribute rare and obscure shot-on-video horror films, and as well as we do like reviews and interviews, podcasts, a whole bunch of extra kind of fun stuff on the site as well. It's kind of like we aim to be like kind of a one-stop shop for all things shot-on-video horror.
So where do you go to find these movies that you're distributing? How did you get into that?
Yeah, so the way I got into distributing was originally the website was really just aimed more as a fandom-type website for shot-on-video horror films. Shot-on-video horror films were really influential to me growing up. They kind of showed me that I could make my own movies with a lot of drive and heart and all that. And so I eventually, went to film school and learned the tricks of the trade, so to speak, and ended up starting this website. And I was working on a documentary web series all about the making of shot-on-video movies, and it was kind of my way of paying it back to all these people who influenced me to get into the industry.
Okay.
And while working on this, one of the people I interviewed was a director named Jay Wolfel, who people probably know most for a few of his different movies, or like Demonicus, Demon Gladiator from Hell, Transfer 6, Beyond Dream's Door, a whole bunch of different movies. And I'm interviewing Jay, and we're kind of just talking in between kind of the interview at one point. And I kind of mentioned that I'm really into VHS. And he's like, oh, well, I got a bunch of VHS tapes. And so he ended up giving me like a big stack of VHS tapes, which was really cool. And on one of those tapes, there was a movie called Dead Silence. It was a dub tape. It had like 3 or 4 movies on it. But this particular tape caught my eye because it had this movie Dead Silence on it, which at the time was a very obscure, rare shot-on-video movie made by a director named Hugh Gallagher. Mm-hmm. And it was not out on DVD. It was extremely hard to find on VHS. So I was like really excited to check out Dead Silence. And so I go home to throw on Dead Silence, and before it is a little movie, I noticed the title is Metal Noir. I'm like, I've never heard of this. What is this movie? And so I put on Metal Noir, and immediately I noticed a couple recognizable names from shot-on-video horror for people who are into it. I noticed Hugh Gallagher's name. Once again, he was involved in that one, as well as Charles Pinion, who was another filmmaker, and both of them kind of had acting roles in Metal Noir. And Metal Noir was just this insanely bonkers, like great horror film. I mean, the best way I could describe it is it's Hellraiser meets Trick or Treat. And it was so much fun. I loved the movie, and I was going to do a review on the website, and so I was doing a little bit of research on the title to see, what I could find out about it. And come to find out, the movie was never released. And so I was extremely shocked. I'm like, how is this movie not out there? I mean, this is a great movie. I absolutely, fallen in love with this film. And long story short, I contacted the director, David R. Williams, and we made a deal. We struck up a friendship, and we started working on our very first DVD release, which was Metal Noir.
Okay. I was just looking at Dead Silence here. That was 1989.
Yes.
Has this been released since on?
Yeah, so Sub Rosa Studios put out Dead Silence on DVD.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is available now. People can get that now, but at the time it was not released.
Just so they don't get confused, this is 1989 Dead Silence, not the other films that have followed in same titles. Yeah,
not the James Bond movie.
Which this looks better. I'm interested in checking this one out now.
It's a lot of fun. Personally, I'd recommend the filmmaker's other work a lot more. Like, he's still learning the craft with Dead Silence, but he went on to direct what's referred to as the Gore trilogy,
okay,
which is Goregasm, Gorotica, and Gore Horror. And those movies are just amazingly great horror films. I mean, I highly recommend them to anyone, even if you're not into shot on video or micro budget stuff. They're just really, really good stories, really well made.
That's pretty awesome. The reason why we created like the moratorium too, I mean, I grew up just a film enthusiast, just watching as many movies as possible. I managed a movie theater, a drive-in and a movie theater and a video store. And I just grew up around, videos. And there's nothing I love more than just a beat up box of VHS tape, something that's been manhandled many, many times, but spending a lot of time in the horror section of the video store. I mean, is this kind of where you were brought up too? What got you into this type of thing just growing up?
Yeah, so, I mean, like a lot of, I think, horror kids, I kind of grew up, I think it started with dinosaurs and slowly moved on to monsters. I remember watching the Universal monster movies on UHF television when I was a kid, as a child of the 80s. And, when my family got our first VCR, I think it was like 6 or 7, and that completely just changed my life. I mean, after that, I was kind of I'm not a real popular kid, kind of a rebel from the outset. And so the VCR, the video store pretty much became my best friend, and one membership led to 2, led to 3, led to 4, led to 5. I mean, I'd have my mom drive me all around San Diego to various video stores just trying to watch any horror movie I could watch, and once you started seeing all the mainstream stuff, that's when you started digging deeper into, the low budget stuff and the micro budget stuff and the shot on video stuff. And, just ginormous fan. I mean, I eventually worked in a video store myself, and was probably my favorite job I ever had, as a kid. And that was a lot of fun. And, I just huge horror fan. I got a, very large collection myself. And, but horror in general, when you first start out, you watch all the classics, so to speak, the Friday 13th and stuff like that. And then you slowly kind of get into the more obscure and weird stuff, the stuff you see in the back of the magazines, the back of Fangoria magazine or Draculina and all these other great publications that were around, the early 90s and stuff. And that was kind of really the beginning of noticing shot on video horror. I mean, I'd seen a few before, like things like Redneck Zombies or Blood Cult. But once I started really digging into micro budget cinema, that's really when I found my passion. I was like, wow, I love these types of movies because they take chances and they do, they do the things you'd never see in a regular horror film, And so that's what really just attracted me to micro budget horror in specific, and kind of taught me hey, if I got a camera and I can get together some friends, maybe a little bit of money, I can make my own things, and that's kind of how I started as well, with my early filmmaking as well.
So did you have a group of friends that you grew up with that kind of had similar interests? And did you get an old video recorder and just go out and just film whatever you could, just doing silly scenes with your friends? Just curious.
Yeah, so pretty much the way I really started with the filmmaking in general was I had a friend and he had gotten a camera And people have to remember, back in the late 80s, early 90s, video cameras are still really expensive. Like,
Oh, yeah.
and I grew up very poor. I was raised by a single mother. We didn't really have a pot to piss in, so to speak. And so, I couldn't imagine even owning a camera back then. But one of my friends, he his family's a little more well-to-do, and he got a camera. And it kind of first started. He wanted to make this weird short movie. He had this concept, and he knew I was really into horror. He knew I was really into, like, especially at that time, I think like a lot of horror kids, we were all obsessed with Tom Savini. We all wanted to do special makeup effects because it was just the coolest thing ever. I mean, most horror fans, I think, of that era were obsessed with Savini and his work. It was so innovative to us back then. And so, I kind of wanted to do that type of stuff myself in those early days. That's what I was more focused on. Was I'd always wanted to do special effects. And I mean, even as a kid, there was this costume store near my house, and I'd buy like fake fingers and, like just stupid little things, masks and, severed body parts. And I'd literally play with this shit just as a kid, with no thought of even making movies. It was just fun to play with this type of stuff because I was kind of morbid. And so when my buddy was going to make this kind of little short horror film, he asked if I wanted to do some effects for it. And so, I helped him out with some effects on this little short movie he did. And that pretty much started like getting the bug. And so I started kind of collaborating with him, mainly doing effects. And then eventually my grandfather got a video camera and he would let me use his video camera. And that's kind of how I started making my own stuff. And I really didn't have a big group of friends. So like even my early work is probably like a lot of people's early work. It's a lot of stop animation with like action figures and stuff like that, and yarn. I used to use yarn for blood for stop animation. And, so a lot of that early stuff, I wouldn't say I had a big group of friends, but I definitely had a couple friends who like were extremely supportive and would just act like idiots on camera. Whatever stupid thing I'd ask them to do, they would do. And, that was pretty much my film school. I mean, I did go to film school, but I'll be honest, I don't feel I learned much in film school. I learned a lot more just by being in the backyard with my buddies and a video camera and just, experimenting and trying out different kind of techniques and stuff.
Did you go to film school like right out of high school or?
No. So, I guess like a lot of teenagers, I kind of, got into drugs and alcohol and partying and, punk rock and music. I was primarily a musician back in those days, played in a lot of bands and stuff. I was living with my mom. I'm in my early 20s, and it's a generic, what are you going to do with your life speech, that you get. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, I mean, I just kind of had a bad attitude, I'll be honest. And my mom had seen commercials for a local college that had taught video production, and she knew I was really into movies and that me and my friends would make these little movies and stuff. And so she was like, well, why don't you look into doing that? And to me at the time, that seemed like a huge pipe dream. I mean, it cost thousands of dollars to go to college. And like I said, we were very poor growing up, but she's like, hey, I'll pay for half the education if you pay for the other half, if this is something you really want to do. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll go for it. And so I actually studied, it actually was at film school. It was at an arts college. So I studied graphic design as well as digital video production. That's what I have my degree in.
Awesome.
It was cool going to college. It was good for like networking. Eventually that did lead to a job in the film industry just from the networking from college. But honestly, I really didn't learn much about the field in college. And one thing that I like to encourage young people today, especially people just getting into filmmaking and who think they want to, get into that as a career path, is, hey, there's so many. I mean, nowadays you can shoot a movie on your freaking phone.
Yes.
Like, you got video tutorials, all these free softwares where you can edit now and you can do visual effects. And a lot of this stuff wasn't around back in the day.
Right.
And so there's so much just right at people's fingertips today. And my thing is like, hey, if you want to learn, just do it, man. Just go out there, freaking do it, and see if it's really right for you. Because it's a tough industry. There's a lot of people who want to get into the film industry. And, I've worked in it now professionally for, 15 plus years, and I've worked on many big budget Hollywood films. I do visual effects, and I used to work for a 3D company, and now I work for Rifftrax. And so, I've been working professionally in the industry for a long time, but, it's not as glitzy and glamoury as I think as people make it out to be. Oh, at the end of the day, it is a job, and you know, you got to work your freaking ass off. You know, in my case, like with the Hollywood films, I was never into big Hollywood films, so you know, I'd tell my friends, "Oh yeah, I'm working on Man of Steel," and they'd be like, "Wow, that's so cool." And to me, it's like, no, I don't care. I'd rather be working on the latest Tim Ritter movie at home, you know. And while I was doing that stuff, that's also what I was doing. So I'd be getting paid my day job, you know, working on Shrek and Man of Steel and Transformers and stuff like that. But then I'd go home and work on movies for Todd Sheets and for Tim Ritter and Chris Seaver and all my low budget heroes, you know. And that
awesome.
meant a lot more to me than the, you know, the big budget stuff.
Right. I didn't go to film school or anything like that, but, you know, I fancied myself a writer back in the day, and I wrote, you know, several scripts and such, and I was, you know, saved up and bought a little, at this time it was a little mini DV camera because, you know, I'm well into my mid-20s when I was trying to do something like this, because I didn't have a whole group of friends that had the aspiration to become something like, you know, just rogue filmmaking. But it wasn't until my 20s that I actually met the group of friends that I hang around with now, that they did that growing up, running around with a camera. So I was like, I really wanted to be a part of, you know, of doing more. And so I started writing scripts, but I was, of course, wanting, you know, a big budget script on a no budget, you know, production.
Right.
You know, we did little shorts and stuff, and just stuff that will never see the light of day, you know, but it was a lot of fun. And that's what I think that I try to talk to my kid about it too. You know, if you want something, just do it.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. It's all a learning experience. And if you could just get out there and just try to do something, like you said, we can do anything on our phones today, and video cameras are plentiful and cheap, and you can do your own editing. When back in the day, it was expensive. It was difficult to do. I did editing for a guy. I did hunting shows. And doing voiceover for video, and you know, it was fun, but it's at the same time I didn't enjoy myself because I wanted to be doing something more. I didn't want to be stuck in front of a screen editing hunting. You know, like I'm not putting down hunters. That's great. It's just not my bag. Right. To me it was just boring, and it just paid the bills. But I wanted to do more. So did you get into writing at a young age and writing little scripts and such?
Oh yeah, actually, you know, when I was really young, like I discovered Stephen King very young, you know, thanks to horror movies. Once again, you start watching horror movies, you keep seeing Stephen King, Stephen King, Stephen King. And, you know, as a big reader, as you know, I still do love to read. And, you know, I discovered Stephen King and was just like, wow, this is amazing. And like literally started plowing through, you know, his ginormous books at a very young age, probably not even old enough to understand half of the concepts going on in them, you know. And I remember, actually, I have a pretty funny story. I think it was third grade. You know, I used to write like these horror stories, and I would write my own little horror stories. And I had a friend in school, and he'd draw little pictures for me, you know, and I'd kind of make these little fake homemade horror books, so to speak.
Cool.
And, you know, I remember one day getting called into the office, and my mom was there as well. And I'm like, well, you know, what's going on here? And me and my mother proceed to get lectured by a teacher and the principal, saying that they're afraid for me. They think that I'm going to grow up and become a serial killer because I have an interest in horror, and because I'm writing all these disgusting stories where people are getting disemboweled and stuff like that, you know. And I still remember it to this day. My mom literally stood up. She said, "Fuck you.
Oh.
My kid has an imagination. He loves to write. This is what he likes to do. He's a good kid. And I'm not going to sit here and listen to you guys psychoanalyze my child." And that always stuck with me. You know, that's
awesome.
One thing that was always great is, you know, I grew up just with a single mom, but my mom was so into letting me be myself. She truly believed, be yourself, be an individual. Don't worry what other people think. Don't worry about any of that. You know, and that's why, yeah, I mean, she was the one who pushed me, even, like I said, to you know, look into and go into film school and stuff. But yeah, I was a huge writer. I used to love writing. And now I don't really write so much anymore. I love, like, for most of my movies, I do come up with the concepts. I usually come up with the initial concepts, and I do still some writing. But usually I'll pass that on to a writer friend of mine. I have a few different writers I've worked with, and that's mainly because I'm not very good at writing dialogue. So
I understand
I
that.
realize my weak spots. I think that's another thing people need to learn in the film industry, in general, is a little bit of humility. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, we're not always the best at certain aspects, and so why not, if you want to make a really good product, why don't you bring in someone who's better than you to help
Right.
mold it into what you want it to be. And it's hard to find good writers who, you're really in tune with. But luckily, I've found a couple people that I've worked with who, we're pretty much on the same wavelength. So I give them a nice detailed outline, and they'll just write such an amazing script and add their own, great things to the script as well.
Mm-hmm. That's good to have the collaboration too. When I got into my group of friends, that's how we got started. I got hooked up with one friend in particular that we had a such a succinct mindset that we just worked really good together and started creating stories. And a lot of these will never see the light of day, but
Sure.
I've written 5 or 6 scripts and I was really, really proud of them. Now, did I send them off? No, because I'm really hard on myself and it's never going to be good enough,
Right.
and I'll keep working on it. I'll continually work on these projects in my head. And to me, it's a good go-to in my mind. It's like, oh, I remember when I was writing this, this was a lot of fun. And
Right.
how I wanted to shoot this if I ever got a chance. But, actually rogue filmmaking it's not easy. You got to get your friends and you got to get everybody invested in the interest of doing such things, but doing it on their own time, because you say micro budget, but it's also really a lot of no budget films.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, everything I've done, I've pretty much self-produced, and almost everyone I've worked with, they're not actors. Those are literally my friends, These are people that I hang out with, and I just beg them to be in my movies. I beg them to crew on my movies. I beg them to help out on the movies, and bribe them with pizza and beer, and but it is tough because not a lot of people realize how much work goes into it. I mean, I can't tell you how many projects I started that just fell apart because someone left mid-project, and they were crucial to that story. You know what I mean?
Right.
People don't realize that even on the micro budget level, there's crazy directors like myself who will do 50 takes of something just to get it perfect, and we'll work a 15-hour day. That's not unheard of when I shoot. I made this one short trailer for this movie called Grindsploitation. We made this trailer called Cannibal Vampire Callgirl Hookers from Outer Space Part 3.
Yes.
And when I made that trailer, it's a 5-minute long trailer. I was asked just to make a trailer. And it was actually a sequel. There is a part 1 and 2. Right. But anyways, I went to make this trailer, and we must have shot at least 8 to 10 hours of footage. For a 5-minute trailer. And I joke with my cast and crew afterwards because, we shot so many different setups. Literally, I think there's over 100 cuts in the trailer. And there's so many different setups. There's a ton of gore effects. There's probably like 30 or 40 death scenes in it. And, tons of nudity and sex stuff in it. And I joke with my cast and crew, like, gosh, if I would have just been smart enough to write some freaking dialogue, we would have had a feature out of this thing, because we put that much work into just this short trailer,
Right.
And, how much work goes into this stuff. But then, of course, you also do have people who put no time into their stuff. That's kind of the flip side, and that's, I feel that's becoming even more prevalent today. I can't tell you how many movies I see. People submit me stuff all the time, because we run the distribution company to see if we're interested in putting it out. And I've seen some movies. I'm just like, you made this in one day. Like, did you even try? You know what I mean? And I'm all about putting out stuff that I really enjoy. So I wouldn't put out something like that myself. But it's cool that people are trying, but I feel like if you really want to make something good, you have to put the time in, you have to put the heart in, you have to put the effort in. And if you're not willing to do those things, you're never going to get better at your field. You know what I mean? And it's all about getting better with every project. It's kind of like what you were talking about earlier with being a perfectionist, with your scripts. I'm almost the same way with my filmmaking as well as my editing. I've edited quite a few features that I didn't even make. I'll sit there and I'll watch those same 7 takes over and over again, analyzing every little tiny aspect. Where are their eyes? Is their eye line right? Where's the emotion? Is the sound good? There's so many little things. And sometimes, I just have to tell myself, stop, Tony, pick that take. It's good enough. Move on, But not everyone takes it, so perfectionist as myself. And honestly, I've learned to dial that back a little bit as I've, done more and more projects.
Oh, I understand that. I do the same thing with even the podcast. I spend so much time editing the podcast and trying to cut out, every every
Right.
every little bit of silence. Oh, I can hear a mouse click here. I'm just like trying to make it perfect for those 30 people who are listening to it every week,
Right.
But hey, it's a love. This was, like I said, we built this podcast around this idea, which was the moratorium. Now, the moratorium is what we had at the video store that I worked. I worked there for 7 years, by the way.
Okay.
And we had this small section of videos that were unavailable. And we created this thing. It was the moratorium. These are unavailable anywhere. These are not for purchase. Which a lot of it included like the Faces of Death series,
Sure.
and
love the Disney stuff. Yeah, that was always moratorium.
Oh yeah, the Disney stuff was constantly.
They're notorious for that.
So we created this section, and it just kept growing, and some of our best rented films were like the Faces of Death, series and stuff that people couldn't find anywhere else. And we reached out to find these little films. So that's why we created this podcast, is talking about films that nobody's talking about. And you, like you said, with your film history, you've been on a lot of, involved in a lot of Hollywood productions, but that was just there to pay the bills. That's not really what you were striving to be. And I admire you going forward with your career and doing these films and bringing these films to the public. I think it's great.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a labor of love, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. So when I went to college, I was trying to find, screenplay writing. Of course, it was the college that I went to in Northeast Oklahoma. There wasn't a whole lot available, and that screenplay writing class, filled up before I could get into it. But I did a class called Writing Drama for Radio. And we listened to a lot of radio plays, this is old time radio plays. And this was a lot of people that were in this class were mainly stage production type people, and I've never wanted to be in drama class, and I never wanted to be on the stage, and I don't really care to even be on camera, hence why I'm on the radio. Right. And, but so we had to write 2 30-minute radio plays and act them out in class with music, and we had to make little commercials and stuff to go with it. And, this is pre-internet time. To get certain things done, like even some special effects sound, I really had to dig.
Sure, yeah.
Again, and I was trying to show that I'm versatile, because I've always been a horror guy, but I want to show you that I can do other things too. Right. So I was working on some drama ideas, and it came around to, okay, we got to get these next rounds of plays going. Who wants to go first? And the instructor basically pointed, he's like, hey, Tim, can you come up with something next week? And I'm like, oh shit, in a week? Right. And I'm like, yes, challenge accepted. Sure, I'll come up with something. I had like 3 or 4 ideas I was working with, but on such a crunch time, what was I most familiar with? And it was horror. Right. Of course, horror. And I actually wrote this one-man play, and it was called Of Natural Circumstance. And it was just a guy talking to his shrink, but the shrink never answers anything. It's just a guy just basically unloading everything.
Right.
And it was just me in front of this class and it ran 48 minutes long. I just going on and on. It was great. I loved it. Now, did anybody applaud or ask for my, ask for my hand and with their stuff? No, I think that made me more of a pariah.
Yeah, there's definitely limitations. That kind of reminds me of a short I made called Love Me in Pieces, also known as Computer Day. And I was approached by filmmaker Todd Sheets. Most people know him for the zombie bloodbath movies and most recently Clownado and Bone Hill Road. And Todd was doing this anthology and he offered me a slot, but I had a month to produce a movie. I mean, I had a month to pretty much write, shoot, direct, edit, and put together this movie. And, so in that particular case, it was all about how can I simplify a movie? How can I make a movie, where it's contained mainly in a couple locations? And, that movie was literally written around the basis of, hey, we have to do this fast, but we want to make it quality. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, sometimes working with, within parameters like that, it can be challenging, but it can actually force the best out of you. I'm still very proud of that particular short. And, I try to put a lot of social commentary in that one. And which is something I try to do with a lot of my work, not all my work. Some of my work is just pure exploitation fun, Mm-hmm. Whenever I can sneak some kind of social commentary in there, like the greats like George Romero and all that. I'm not claiming to be anywhere near a Romero or a Carpenter or anything like that. But I think it always helps to kind of have some substance, within even your schlocky, low budget type exploitation film,
You see, I'm looking at your filmography here, looking at stuff like Ghost in a Teeny Bikini and Bikini Girls from the Lost Planet. These are movies that I want to watch. And that was Fred Olin Ray.
Yeah, so those are all fake movie credits, the Fred Olin Ray one.
Okay.
And the way that started was Fred Olin Ray used to have this forum online. It was called the Retro Media Forum. And I've always been a huge Fred Olin Ray fan. Mm-hmm. I even use my pseudonym that I use sometimes for some of my work is Fred Olin Wood, which is a mix of Fred Olin Ray and Ed Wood. And, so I'm a huge Fred Olin Ray fan. I have been so for years. And so this forum was so great, too, because back then, this was kind of really before, Facebook and all that stuff. And there was a ton of filmmakers in this, people who I consider really good friends today, people like Ron Ford and Joe Sherlock and, Ted Newsom and all these great filmmakers. And it was really cool because, it was all just conversation about film and movies and all these people love sci-fi horror and it was a blast. And one time Fred had made this movie called The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful.
Okay.
And he needed a new title for cable. I guess they didn't want to go with the cable title. And so he had a little contest. And he's like, whoever comes up with the name, I'll give you a movie credit. I'll make you the associate producer of the film. Okay. So I came up with the title Bikini Roundup and ended up winning the contest. And so I got that was actually my first film credit ever, was associate producer on Bikini Roundup, which I found hilarious because the other thing that's real funny about it, and I still have this printed up, and I keep this in my office, is there was a picture. My credit is on a butt, and for people who know the film industry, associate producer, people like to call them ass prod. So I thought it was really funny that I have this credit on a butt, and that's so Fred Olin Ray. He's so funny. He's such a great guy, great filmmaker. And so ever since then, Fred makes these softcore movies, and I think he just has to fill up the credits. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of us who were on the forum back then, he just gives us credits in all these movies.
Awesome.
So unfortunately, I was never a bikini wrangler on Teenage Bikini Cave Girl, but I would have loved to be. And if Fred gives me the call, I'm there, man.
Yeah, I will be lead bikini wrangler.
So yeah, I have quite a few credits from Fred. Pretty much if you see anything with bikini, I really didn't earn it except for that Bikini Roundup. But I'm happy to have it because I'm personally a fan of movies with the word bikini in it. I have a very large bikini movie collection myself. That's another one of my passions. Is I love 80s TNA sex comedies. It's one of my other genres I'm just obsessed with. I grew up watching USA Up All Night, which was just that was really the channel that just like solidified my love for B movies. You know what I mean?
So does being in California help you with being in any of these productions or finding the right channels to make said movies?
In some ways, being in California has been great for it. In other ways, being in California is terrible for it.
Okay.
Particularly, I'm in San Diego, which is, I'd say, I don't know, about 100 miles south of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles is about a couple-hour drive from me. And I've gone up there. I've worked on movies up there and stuff, and which is great. You know, one of the first movies I worked on was Rick Sloan's Hobgoblins 2.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, huge Rick Sloan fan as well. I used to run the Rick Sloan Yahoo fan group, and that's how I met Rick Sloan back in the day. And he hit me up and he's like, I'm thinking of making Hobgoblins 2, you know, and was kind of asking me, do you think people are going to want this and all this? And I told him, yes, we want Hobgoblins 2. We want it. And at the time, that was when I was in film school. So I had offered, you know, at that point, I hadn't got to the film aspect. I was still doing graphic design. So I offered to do like props and stuff like that. And I ended up making a lot of props for the movie. And that led to me actually being a PA on the movie and working on the movie. And I would drive from San Diego to LA almost every day, like 7 days straight. I think I worked on that movie and ended up getting to be in the movie, which was a lot of fun, and building sets. I mean, I learned so much from working with Rick Sloan. It was really a invaluable lesson, you know. So like things like that were great. But on the other hand, you know, being so close to LA, you know, there's not a lot of jobs in San Diego for film. You know, I live in San Diego. I'm born and raised here. I've been here my entire life. And so, you know, I've been lucky enough that the couple film companies that have been in San Diego, you know, I first started with a movie company called Legend 3D, aka Legend Films. People might know them. They put out a lot of colorized versions of horror classics like Glen or Glenda, Night of the Living Dead, you know, House on Haunted Hill, stuff like that. And so, you know, I worked for them and I worked for their 3D department. And then, like a lot of companies, they moved to Canada, you know. You know, it's a lot cheaper to make movies up in Canada. And so, and then, you know, I ended up not working in the industry for a while. I was running a thrift store actually out here until I got lucky, and the people from Legend Films who remembered me, you know, I was kind of doing still some side work for them, and Legend Films kind of is in conjunction with Rifftrax.
Awesome.
So, and that's how I kind of got into working with Rifftrax, which is just amazing. I mean, I grew up watching Mystery Science Theater 3000, and now that those are my bosses, you know, it's so cool, you know. And I feel very honored to get to watch, you know, what people consider bad movies. I mean, I personally like most of the movies we do, but to watch those movies for a living, I mean, it's great, you know, and get to edit them and do other stuff. And so, I mean, I've been very fortunate. But they're really, you know, the problem is most of the business is in Los Angeles. Most of the business now is also in Canada. I know there's a few other states I've heard where, you know, they got a pretty good film industries. It's a tough job to crack into. You know, when I lost that first big gig, you know, and I started working at the thrift store, I worked there for about 3 years or so. And I almost never thought I'd work professionally in the industry again. I thought okay, well, I'll continue doing what I'm doing, my stuff, and doing effects and stuff like that for other people, freelance.
Right.
But I, you know, never thought like, oh, I'm going to find another job in this industry, you know, and it's so cutthroat. It's so hard. And that's why I try to tell people too, who want to break into the industry, you have to do this because you love it. You don't expect to get famous. Don't expect to get a job. Don't expect to make money, because there's a ton of talented people out there. There's so many talented people out there. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like that crapshoot. You got to be the lucky guy. And I've been very fortunate. But believe it or not, it's so hard to find anyone to act in movies. That's always been my biggest problem in San Diego. Is, you know, I'll put ads out, you know, looking for people to act and stuff like that, and I can never find people. It's so difficult, and I feel like if I was in Los Angeles, I'd probably have 100 people hit me up for one of my casting calls.
Oh, gotcha.
You know, where in San Diego, I'm lucky if one person hits me up. You know what I mean? You know, not to discourage anyone, but, you know, you'll have the one person will hit you up will be the worst actor you've ever seen in your life. You know what I mean? And so you're like, oh, I don't know about this person, you know, but So, it's definitely challenging in that regard. We're close enough to LA where, sure, I could go out there and work on projects, but, actually working on projects in San Diego can be quite difficult. Like there's a little bit of a horror film scene out here, but they're not really into micro budget stuff. I've had a few of my movies screened out here and stuff, and they did okay, but it's kind of a very scenester type scene out here, and if you're not into the latest horror movie, they don't give a shit,
Oh, gotcha.
kind of deal, and I'm definitely one of those guys. I'm not into modern horror very much, except for independent. I still love independent horror, but I don't like the shit that Hollywood spits out. I think it's all crap, and
No, exactly.
so
I feel
know
the same way.
Well, it's funny. A lot of people get offended by that, though. I mean, like I said, in the San Diego scene, like I said, I had this great screening. It was so awesome. They screened one of my movies, and it was a really great experience. And then they do a Q&A at the end, and I made the mistake of saying, I don't like modern horror movies. And oh my God, these people got so offended and mad at me. And now they won't screen any of my movies.
No.
They won't do it. I mean, I felt like I was turned into a pariah all because I had a different opinion on horror. And to me, that's really sad because, I always thought horror and horror fans were kind of accepting type people. You know what I mean? It reminds me a lot of the punk rock scene, the horror scene. There's a lot of people who are very open-minded and stuff like that. But unfortunately, there's always clubs. There's always the cool kids club. And if you're not the cool kid, then you just don't fit in,
I think, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast too, and we talk about the beginnings of just really B movies, but we do talk about the subgenres and such. And you think that do you think like movies like the Blair Witch Project helped to at least bring to light that these no budget films could actually be successful and, shot on video films? And I just bring that up because I know a lot of the audience would know about that, but it just seemed like it kind of opened the door for found footage market.
Blair Witch was such a trip. And the reason it was a trip, at least to me, is like, I was already a big shot on video horror fan before that movie came out. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading about it in an early Fango, Fangoria magazine had mentioned, hey, there's this independent movie. It was made for $6,000, shot on video and film. That's, making a splash in the film festival scene. And now it just got picked up by Lionsgate. It just got picked up by a major studio, big movie deal. And they're going to put it out there and it's going to, be a big Hollywood movie. And I remember reading about that and just being like, finally, yes, that is so awesome that an indie filmmaker who made a movie for no money is going to go out in theaters. And I remember saying to myself right then and there, I'm like, I want to see this in the theaters when it comes out, And back then, like a lot of guys, I would get every issue of Fangoria. The one issue I missed from that 6-year run that I have every issue of is the Blair Witch issue. And it's because there was so much freaking hype around that movie that, and I didn't even realize the hype around it because I don't really watch television much or anything. I honestly haven't even had TV in 20 years. I watch DVDs and videos, but I don't watch, cable TV or anything like that. And I really didn't realize how much hype was around that movie until I went and saw it with some friends in the theater, and they were talking about it beforehand and thinking it was real. And I'm like, guys, it's not real. I'm like, I got the magazines at home that talk about this movie's fake. It's just a movie, guys. But they were convinced it was real, and they wouldn't even listen to me. They thought I was pulling them on, which I find hilarious. Because now everyone tries to act like, oh, I didn't think that was real. But that marketing, they really fooled a shit ton of people. A ton of people thought that movie was, real. And honestly, I like the movie. I think it's a cool little flick. Do I think it's amazing? No, it's not an amazing movie. And I get how some people don't like it. I think most people don't like it because they were taken by it because they thought it was real. Right. And then when they found out it wasn't, they felt really freaking stupid. So, I think Blair Witch was a great thing. But it did lead to this whole found footage genre, which I'll be honest, I'm just not a fan of found footage. After that, you got Paranormal Activity, which was actually made by an independent filmmaker out of San Diego here. And I'm sorry, but, I don't want to put down other people for liking the film, but to me, that film is just completely terrible. It's just, it's just pretty much stealing the Blair Witch formula, so to speak, and just not doing it very well.
Right.
And, you know, bad CGI, bad acting. I mean, the acting in that movie is so atrocious. It's like people would have been in my movies. So, I mean, I think it was good that a movie like Blair Witch got out there and made a lot of money and did cool. And, but it led to all these copycat films. I mean, and now we're in like found footage heaven. Like everyone's making found footage movies.
Oh, yeah.
And I just can't, man. Some people could say one of my movies, you know, I did a movie for the anthology High 8.
Yes, I was just looking at that too.
Horror Independent 8. Yeah, and you know, there's a section in that could maybe be construed as found footage, but that was not what we were going for whatsoever. It's a very different story. And yeah, just not a fan of that genre, but it was very cool to see a micro budget film, you know, make it. You know, that was very cool. It gave a lot of us hope that, hey, we could do this too. That, you know, gave you a little more hope that, hey, maybe this isn't a pipe dream. Maybe you could be successful. But of course, we all know now that we're all wrong.
Yeah.
We were all wrong. You know, that was the 1 in a million lucky chance, and those guys got really lucky with that one.
So when you've worked in visual effects for quite some time then.
Yeah.
Now what are you doing with your visual effects? I mean, with movies like Clownado and Sex Squatch. I'm sorry, Sex Squatch is awesome.
You know, everyone keeps mentioning Sex Squatch to me lately. That was a fun one to do. Yeah. So, you know, mainly I do compositing. So I specialize in doing explosions and blood and, you know, all sorts of different things, transformations. You know, I've done a lot of different stuff. You know, when I first kind of got into editing and computer programs, I discovered, you know, After Effects, After Effects was in its real infancy back in those days. It was, I think I started on After Effects at version 3 or something, and slowly started teaching myself compositing. And even before then, in Final Cut, I remember Final Cut, like doing my own compositing, you know, cutting off people's heads and replacing their bodies and stuff like that. And, you know, it was just something that I always found kind of fun to do, visual effects. And slowly, you know, I got my first visual effects job. I think that was a movie by Brett Kelly. I think the first one I did for him was Pray for the Beast. And that was like my first real working on a real movie, you know, that got distributed and everything. And that was a lot of fun. I mainly just did some blood work and muzzle flash stuff in that. Yeah, since then I've gone on and I've done, gosh, I don't know how many movies. I'm pretty sure my IMDb is not even remotely accurate. It's probably missing half of them. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I still like doing it. Even though these days I more do it for friends as favors, you know, and it's not really
not lucrative.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's no money in doing effects.
Right.
I mean, I'll be honest, almost every effect job I've done it for free. Like, and it's because these are people whose work I admire. These are my idols. These were the guys who inspired me, you know, Todd Sheets, Tim Ritter, Chris Seaver, Brett Kelly, all these guys, you know, these are all people who were very influential to me, and it's kind of my way of paying them back and helping out with the film, you know, being part of the team, you know, and which is great. So yeah, sometimes I still do some work. I was hit up again recently to do some work. I've been doing a lot of work for Tim Ritter lately on a lot of his projects. But artistically, I'd rather focus more on creating my own films or, you know, even just distributing films and working on all that.
So before we go on to talk more about what you do with SOV Horror, you touched base on it, but Jason wouldn't be happy if I didn't try to dive a little bit more into your Mystery Science Theater and Rifftrax history now. We're big, huge MST fans, and and I got into Rifftrax. Like I tried to introduce them to Rifftrax when it was just in its infancy, and just showing them that, hey, somebody was actually releasing the movies with the audio already cut into it, and you guys got to watch this. And and now I think he's got it on a continuous loop in his bedroom. You know, it's always on. So what are you doing with Rifftrax?
So I do quite a few things with Rifftrax. My official job there is I'm an assistant video editor. Okay. And but what I mainly do there is For the most part, I run a lot of our streaming platforms. So if you're watching Rifftrax on Amazon, you're watching it on Pluto, you're watching it on Twitch, you're watching on any of these different platforms, hence more than likely I worked on that.
Awesome.
And I also do all the QCing, so I watch all the movies every week. I have to make sure all the files look good and there's no problems and stuff like that. And I also do editing, so I've edited like music videos and stuff like that. And I do sometimes the trailers and the samples and these little things we call hero videos. If you go to rifftrax.com, the little preview video you immediately see when you go to the site, those are all cut by me.
Awesome.
And so yeah, I do a lot of different things for them. And it's a blast. And I've even, recommended movies that we've done, which is so cool. I'm kind of now known as the guy at Rifftrax who, Tony actually likes this crap. And it's so amazing, I mean, like I remember the first time, like meeting the guys, like I'd met them before as a fan, but I'd never met, meeting them as a coworker and as them being my employers was just such a trip, sitting with Mike Nelson and having a beer, it's like, wow, I'm talking to Mike Nelson, but they're all really great guys. It's a great company. We're a very small company. There's only, I believe, 15 or 16 of us. That's it.
Oh, wow.
And we work our asses off, man. We all do it because we love it, and everyone loves the job. Everyone, loves the material, and it's so great having a job like that. I've had many jobs over the years, but I've never had one where it's like everyone loves what they do. Like we all love what we do. We love going to work every day. We love doing this stuff, and it's just so cool, and it's such an honor to even get to work with these guys, and let alone recommend movies. I got them to do the Feeders movies was one I recommended.
Okay.
We're about to do a live show with Jacko, which is another one I recommended.
Awesome.
So it's just it's so awesome. I absolutely love it, and I feel completely honored and just to even be part of that universe.
I totally dig it. All right, so tell me a little bit more, because I think you just started your own SOV horror podcast, right?
Yeah, so I mainly started the podcast. I'll be quite honest. I'm running this DVD label. I actually just sent DVD number 25 to the replicators this morning.
Awesome.
And I've been doing this for just a little over a year now. It's been about a year and 3 months, I believe. And one of the hardest things about running a label, especially when you do everything yourself, I mean, I'm pretty much a one-man operation. I have an artist who helps out with the art, and I have a few people who help out synopsises, as well as a couple people who contribute to the website. But for the most part, like the releases that you buy from my site and watch at home, I cut all the making of documentaries. I do the trailers. I do the authoring. I do, the whole shebang, the remastering of the films, the brand new transfers. But I do all the publicity as well. So it's a lot of work. So I'm like, how can I help promote my label? I know, I was having issues getting interviews, with people like yourself, and other podcasters and other horror magazines. It's really hard to get any press when you're making, when you're putting out micro budget stuff. I mean, if I was putting out, Vinegar Syndrome type stuff, I'd probably be getting tons of press. But, I put out shot on video movies from the 80s and 90s, and unfortunately there's not a big scene for those. And I feel like the big horror websites don't give a shit about this type of content.
Right.
And so it's really hard to get any publicity. So I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to start my own podcast to help promote my label, but at the same time, make people so they can hear these great stories from these filmmakers. I mean, we've only done a few episodes so far. I know myself, anytime I see a podcast and there's some shot on video filmmaker on there, I'm like, I am listening to this. And I know there's other fans out there like me. So, I'm kind of making this podcast as not only a way to promote, our brand, but also as a way to preserve these stories. Because that's another thing, with the website and with the DVD label in general, is the heyday of SOV was really, a lot of people want to say it's the 80s, but I really feel it was the early 90s. The early 90s was when video cameras were getting cheaper. people were starting to be able to afford the technology. You know, in the 80s, you still had to have quite a bit of money to make a shot-on-video movie. It still was not very cheap. Come the 90s, prices were going down. It was getting a lot cheaper. Now horror fans could make their own horror movies, you know, and that was really the heyday. But, you know, we're getting old. The 90s was 30 years ago. I mean, these people are dying. The 80s was 40 years ago, you know? All these people are dying, and their stories are dying with it. And to me, like, this is such an important part of film history. I mean, nowadays, like we said, everyone can shoot on their phones and all that, but I feel like that wouldn't be acceptable, or even we wouldn't even be there if it wasn't for these other pioneers who were just film fans who wanted to make their own damn movie, as Lloyd Kaufman likes to say. You know, like, these guys said, "Screw it, I'm going to make my own movie and I'm going to put it out there." You know, and they influenced so many people, not just myself, but tons of other filmmakers. I've talked to so many filmmakers who are highly influenced by these. And these stories are just disappearing. These people are dying left and right, you know. And so I feel it's very important to preserve the history, you know, not only of the films themselves, but also the stories behind the films, because the stories behind the films are just as crazy as the movies themselves half the time, you know.
That's awesome. But you, so you've also had something like SOBs who love SOV.
Yeah, that was a podcast. It was kind of cool how that came along. They were kind of a newer podcast, and they were reviewing my movie Zombrella's House of Horrors.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I loved it. I watched it the other night. Do you have a part 2 coming out soon? Is that?
Yeah, so part 2 is called Natasha Knighty's Boudoir of Blood.
That's it.
And we did a very early pre-release on that, just for our super fans. I did an autographed run of like 20 copies. But the wide release of that's going to be out in November.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So.
Yeah, so what happened with the SOVs is, like, you know, they were going to review my movie Zombrella's House of Horrors. You know, they're big shot-on-video fans. And they asked me to be a guest on the show. And unfortunately, though, just with the schedule at the time, I couldn't make it. It was very short notice. It was like a week's notice, and I just couldn't make it, unfortunately. So, you know, they reviewed the movie, they loved the movie, and they ended up getting Tim Ritter and Shannon Stockton on the show, who also worked on the movie. And then Rebecca, she's kind of the one who runs the show, Rebecca Reinhardt, and who's a film director in her own right now. She just made a movie called The Embalmers. And people might recognize her. She's a kind of up-and-coming screen queen. She's been in a lot of stuff, including the sequel to Zombrella.
Shameless plug. Right.
Yeah, she approached me, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to be reviewing some Marcus Koch movies. Do you want to jump on an episode with me? My co-host isn't going to be around for one, so, you know, you want to kind of be a guest host." And I said, "Sure," you know, and next thing I knew, they pretty much asked me to join the podcast. And
right.
So I was like, cool, you know, and it's fun getting to rap with them and talk shot-on-video movies. You know, I love talking shot-on-video movies. I can talk about them all day long, you know. So there's a lot of fun, and we're still doing that here and there. Unfortunately, you know, with people's schedules, it's kind of wound down a little bit lately. But I'm hoping that we'll start doing more of those pretty soon here in the future.
Do you also have some just regular interviews also hosted on your website here?
Yep.
With the director David Williams, who did Metal Noir?
Well, we do all sorts of stuff. So yeah, like the big things on the website that I think, you know, if anyone out there listening is kind of interested in learning more about shot on video stuff, you know, definitely check out our website. And there's an ongoing web series, I kind of mentioned it earlier, called SOV: The True Independence. And that is a documentary web series that I've been producing now for quite a many years. And I put them out when I can in between my other work. And it's pretty much behind the scenes stories of making these movies, but they are cut in a documentary format. So it clips from the movies, rare photographs and stuff like that. And, you know, that's kind of really what started SOV Horror, was that SOV: The True Independence web series. Originally it was going to be a film. And what happened was I had amassed so many interviews. I mean, about 50 plus interviews with shot on video alumni.
Awesome.
I just realized, I'm like, you know, it's kind of like we were talking about earlier, being a perfectionist. Like, I want to tell the full and complete story. And I realize if I told that story, it's going to be like a 20-hour film and no one's going to want to watch it. So to me, I would love it, but most people, you know, they don't want that.
Right.
And most documentaries these days are just a lot of talking heads. I feel you don't get a lot of substance. These people are just trying to squeeze it down to an hour and a half. And the history of shot on video movies is just so much information. I'm like, this has to be a series. This can't just be one film. You can't explain it in one film. And so, you know, I decided to change it into a web series, and, you know, we've been working on it ever since, you know, and we still do episodes. I try to do at least a couple a year. You know, we don't do a ton, but then I also have a show, SOV and Beers, where I talk about shot on video horror films as well as beer. I'm a big beer guy. And I don't just review movies with that. With that show, I try to talk about rare facts. I show off pieces from my collection. I have a pretty big, you know, large collection of rare films and stuff like that. And so, yeah, so we get a lot of different stuff, interviews, articles, you know, articles written by people who actually worked in the movies, you know, and I know you interviewed recently Jonathan Knight from B-Movie Madness, and we put all his shot on video movies up on our site as well. And, you know, Jonathan's a great guy. I love Jonathan. Really cool dude.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking
with
him.
And he's in the next movie, too. He's also in Natasha Knighty's Boudoir Blood. So.
Yes. Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, he's a good guy. And another champion of shot on video movies. You know, he definitely is out there and trying to.
And I'm pretty sure he's seen more movies than I could ever get a chance to.
I'm so jealous of when I see everything he's watched like in a day. I'm like, gosh, Jonathan, I wish I could sit and watch movies all day. I'm so jealous.
Exactly. Like, damn, why do I have to have a job?
Yeah, you could just take a week off and go hang out with Jonathan Knight. You know, that probably would be an awesome vacation. If you're listening, Jonathan, we might have to do that.
Call me.
Yeah, we'll get you in there too, Tim. We'll just have a nice week of horror movies.
I dig it. I'll watch just about anything. You know, I do. I love the 80s, though. I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, and just the early slasher films, but also I think the other day I watched Satan's Blade.
Oh, okay.
Which
I've never seen that one. I know of it though.
It's pretty bad, but but I enjoyed it still. I mean, I think the boom mic was a main character because it was in a lot of shots.
Gotcha.
But that's fine with me, you know, because when I see that, I'll go back to MST riffing, you know, and say, oh, boom mic big time.
Well, you know, you probably know this. Not a lot of people probably, you know, who aren't really nerd heads on this stuff, is especially if you're watching a full frame, like VHS of it, that sometimes that boom mic was supposed to be cut out, but they did these crappy pan and scan transfers. And so you'd see the boom mic. It's all about the way they would mat it for video, you know, and thankfully now we got DVDs and widescreen and you don't see that as much with that stuff. But as far as bad movies go, my opinion has always been, you know, a movie's only bad if it's boring. You know,
that's right.
It can be made incompetently. It could have the worst acting. It could have horrible special effects. But if it's fun to watch and you have a good time watching it, then is it really a bad movie?
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
It's movies like The Creeping Terror, you know, stuff like that that's really bad that you just want to fall asleep watching it. You know, you watch 5 minutes and you're like, oh my God, I just can't take this. I'll fall asleep.
It's better than NyQuil.
Yeah. And that's what we got Rifftrax for, right? It's to make those movies a little better.
That's it. So anybody who's interested in getting into shot on video, what would you suggest for them to wet their whistle with? What would you point them towards?
So there's a few that I think would be really good gateway drugs, so to speak, of shot on video. One that I think that's pretty popular with fans is Redneck Zombies. Is a great one. As Troma put that out. It's from 1986. It's a really fun movie. You know, it's got zombies, it's got rednecks. It's pretty much a comedy. It's more of a comedy, but it's got gore. I mean, it's just a really fun movie. And I think That's one that I would show someone if I was trying to get them, like, hey, shot on video is not as bad as you maybe think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, and it's just a personal favorite of mine. Maybe I'm wrong to say it's a good gateway one, but would be Black Devil Doll from Hell,
Oh, yes.
and that's the original, not the remake Black Devil Doll.
Mm-hmm.
But that movie's just so off the wall bonkers. I mean, and I know nowadays it doesn't seem that nuts to have a movie where a puppet rapes a woman, but back in 1983, 84, when I believe that was produced, that's fucking batshit insane. Chester Novel Turner was way above, before everyone else with that one. I mean, that even influenced me. I mean, you saw the Zombarella movie. We have our own.
I was just going to say that.
Yes. And the doll's name is Chester after the filmmaker.
Oh, sweet.
We try to put little nods in our stuff when we can. We like to put little references and stuff in our movies. But Black Devil Doll from Hell is another great one. And another one, I'll just go ahead and give a third one. I guess a third one would be probably Gorotica from Hugh Gallagher. We were kind of talking about him earlier. He did Gorgasm, Gorotica, and Gore Horror. And I love all three of those, but Gorotica is just an example to me of just a great story in a shot on video movie. It's just got it's pretty much about a woman who is a necrophile, and there's a little more going on than that, but I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
But it's just a really good story. It's a fun movie. It's it's disturbing at parts. It's all that stuff that we like in horror films. We even put out, I think there's quite a few titles in our catalog that would be great gateway movies. Movies like The Spirit Gallery that we put out. That was made by John Streisick, who directed some episodes of Tales from the Dark Side and Monsters, the television series.
Okay, yeah.
And he wrote some scripts for Stuart Gordon. He did the Deathbed that Stuart Gordon produced, and he also wrote Stuart Gordon's Stuck, for fans of Stuart Gordon. John is a true artist, man, and his movie is shot on video, but if it was shot on film, everyone would be talking about it. I kid you not.
Wow.
It's a body horror movie, so similar to something like Society. It's one of those examples of a really well-made shot on video movie. You have good acting, you have good camera work, you have good production value, and ultimately, number one, you got a great story,
Awesome.
That's definitely another one. And I'll throw just one more shameless plug. Another one that I just personally love is Mr. Ice Cream Man.
Yeah.
That was originally put out by Dead Alive Home Video in the 90s. Most people know the Clint Howard movie, Ice Cream Man.
Right.
But they're not aware, just before that was a movie called Mr. Ice Cream Man. And Mr. Ice Cream Man is so much fun. It's kind of like a slasher flick. It's not very bloody, but it's just made very well. And the main characters of the story are children and children actors, and the children actors do a great freaking job. And it's one of those movies that it's just shot so well. Like, you could take a still from any part of that movie and it'd make an amazing photograph. You know what I mean? Like, it just looks good. It's a good story. It's very well made. And, our new print of it just looks absolutely amazing.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
We did a brand new transfer and remastered it. And it's probably one of our best looking releases. It looks so beautiful.
That's awesome. And you have a ton of things available on your site, but your prices are really low. So anybody who's interested in trying to get into watching some of these films, you don't have to break the budget and pay $20-$30 to get into some of these films. And I think that's great. You're not trying to get rich off of this. You're trying to actually make it available and giving us a good product. I think that's great.
That's what it's all about. When I started this, I knew one of the first things was like, I'm not going to gouge fans. I'm a fan first and foremost. I personally, hate that companies do like these limited releases that are really overpriced. Like, okay, we're going to charge you $30-$40 for a movie, but we're only making $50. And if you missed out on that first hour, oh, well, fuck you. You can't watch the movie. Right. I hate that.
Yeah.
It's like, I wanted to not do that with my company. I'm like, you know what? I want my movies to be priced at a decent price where people can afford them. and I don't want to really do limited releases. And we've done a couple limited releases, and that's more just because of the licensing deals we had in place for those particular movies, which, you know, every deal is different. That's a whole another, I mean, the topic is finagling, you know, trying to get the rights to these movies is not always the easiest thing. And it's not cheap either, you know. But I try to keep them cheap so, you know, people can enjoy them, you know, because ultimately that's what I want, you know. This is definitely not something I do for money. If anything, I've lost money doing it. I just do it because I love doing it. I mean, I want to be, like I said, I just didn't release 25 to the Duplicator. Like, I wouldn't have got to 25 movies if I didn't love what I do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Especially being a one-man show. And I just think, you know, that my wife is very patient and is cool with me working all hours of the night, you know.
My wife supports me in all of my endeavors here too. She does the same thing. Well, granted, you know, I'm in the studio, which is my garage, right?
Right.
When I'm home, this is where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, you know, you could be worse places. I know where you are. Right?
Exactly. Well, you got a good one there then.
Yeah. But no, that's the support from your wife, you know, the family supporting you and what you do and what you are. That's a great way to be, man.
Yeah.
If people aren't supporting you, then I think you're hanging out with the wrong people.
For sure. You know, I had a teacher in college. He's one of my web teachers, but he taught me one of the best life lessons I've ever heard. But he pretty much said, don't hang out with people who you look down on. Hang out with people that you aspire to be more like.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that really stuck with me. You know, having toxic people in your life just brings you down, man. Surrounding yourself by people you admire and aim to be more like, that brings you up, you know, and life is what we make it. You got to struggle always to go higher. There's always a way to do better. Another thing, you know, you can always better yourself, you know, we're all imperfect people, you know, we can always do more to better ourselves and better the world around us. So I wish more people would listen to those types of lessons. We'd probably live in a better world.
That's
but
right.
hey, you know, one at a time, just spread the knowledge and hopefully, you know, hell, maybe someone listened to this, maybe I changed their view, you know, and so that's all you can hope for, you know.
That's it. All right. Well, tell people again where they can find you.
Yeah. So, if you'd like to get in contact with me, I'm pretty easy. You can find me on Facebook under Tony Masiello. I also, SOV Horror is up on Facebook, as well as we have a group called SOV The True Independence, named after the web series. That's also on Facebook. You can find me there, as well as just my website, sovhorror.com, where, like we said, you can find a ton of different DVDs, T-shirts, merchandise, reviews, videos, all sorts of stuff. I mean, you can definitely kill quite a few hours on the website. So, and I'm always down to talk to fans, people, you know, I'm recommendations for films you'd maybe like us to put us out. Send me your film for me to check out your film. I'm happy to look at your movie. And just wanted to mention, too, we're not just shot on video. We did recently put out our first film release, which is 1988's Blood Orgy of the Leather Girls, which we're very honored to be handling the distribution on that one. And and we're hoping to, you know, expand more. We just started a new label called Basement Videos that's focusing more on indie underground stuff, more newer indie stuff, and young filmmakers. And so, yeah, we're just, you know, trying to share the SOV love. And you know, if I have any message to anyone, it's just, hey, you know, if you haven't really seen many of these movies, you know, or you've watched them in the past and you just kind of like, oh, these are shit, they're shot on video, you know, open your mind a little bit, give them a second chance. There really are some great movies out there, regardless of the format they're shot on.
And it looks like most of the videos you have on your site are completely packed with extras.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We aim to be, the criterion of shot on video. So what I mean, literally, it's so hard sometimes cramming all this stuff on one disc and keeping the quality good. I mean, like that Blood Orgy of the Leather Girls is a great example. I think we have 2 commentaries, multiple interviews, you know, slideshows, a whole trailers. You know, we always try to put a bunch of trailers on our releases too. Yeah, we put a lot of time into these releases. They're not just willy-nilly like, hey, let's just get this out there and make money. I mean, typically we'll spend months working on the extras for each title.
That's awesome. I want that commentary. I love rewatching a movie with commentary. It's just, it's awesome. Yeah. And getting as much information about how they came about and what they did. It's good stuff, man.
Sometimes those stories can even be better than the films themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Just these making of stories are so interesting and inspiring as well. You know?
All right, Tony. Well, I think that I've wasted enough of your time today, and I appreciate you talking with us. This has been a great time, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. Well, that's cool. And hey, if you guys are looking at, I'm not just plugging this, I'm just letting you know, we're putting out on October 26th on our YouTube page. We're releasing, and it's only been released once by us, so extremely rare, 1992 Halloween fan film called The Shape.
Oh, awesome.
And it's a really fun Halloween fan film. So like if you're in, it's made by the guys who made Mr. Ice Cream Man.
Oh, awesome.
And so, yeah, if you're into Halloween, that's like it's a real fun one. That's why we're putting it up on YouTube for all to watch for Halloween season. So I gotta throw that on your radar.
Yeah. Did I see that Matt did a little review on that?
Yeah, there's been a few reviews of it. So we did a very small run of that. We did a very small run of that, kind of a screener run for our super fans. I think we did less than 20 copies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, legally, you can't really release that stuff. So we sold it for nothing. So we didn't make any money off of it. Yeah. It was literally just really what happened was like the filmmakers, when we were doing Mr. Ice Cream Man, they sent me that short, and I was just like, this is so great. I wish we could put this out. And we discussed just making a DVD copy for ourselves, you know, because we just wanted copies for our own collections. And then we're like, well, maybe we can put out a few out there for some reviewers and stuff to kind of hype up the pre-release of it, you know, in October.
Gotcha. I'll be looking forward to it, man.
Cool.
Hey, I appreciate your time and everything that you do, man. Continue burning this torch.
I'm going to try, man.
All right.
You do the same, man. I appreciate it. And yeah, anytime, you want me maybe to hop on and just rap movies or whatever, I'm always open, man.
That sounds like a great time to me.
Groovy.
All right, Tony, you have a good one. Keep with it, brother.
You too. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to a special edition of the Moratorium interview series. We would like to thank Tony for taking the time to talk with us. Join us next week when we try to figure out where we left off several weeks ago with a brand new yarn wall. Check out our website at themoratorium.com. There you can find links to social media, movie links, merch, and more. Be sure to catch up on Krista's blog. She just finished a spooky true crime story that could possibly have links to some of the most notorious of serial killers. Stay safe, thanks for listening, and long live VHS.
Tony actually likes this crap.